Well, hello, everybody. This is Larry from the Blue Collar Nation podcast. I'm here with my business partner, the quite stickling tech whisperer, Mr. Eric Sprague. What's up, Eric? How are you today?
Well, your internet sucks because I can barely hear you. And I don't think stickling's a word.
Stickling, to argue or contend stubbornly, especially about trivial or pretty petty points, like the word I just brought up. How about that?
I still don't believe that's a word.
That was a pretty super performance.
Is that the Urban Dictionary or the Real Dictionary?
Nope. This is the free dictionary.
All right, I'm stickling. You caught me. I get it.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, and it caught you.
Brandon's
Brandon's
stickling too. Just so you know.
Clearly, yeah, clearly.
Oh, so now he's going to own
exist
nothing.
Yesterday.
He's going to drag you into all of this, so it's going to be contentious, which I can hang with.
Well, I finally have on the previous, but today's the revamp of the book club. So it used to be Bill Yaden and Larry, both super high eyes, just beating up on me the whole show. So I actually have a compadre now. So it's much more even playing field now. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, you got a battle buddy now, my friend. 2-on-2, I suppose. That's right. Okay.
I have a compadre here myself. This is going to be getting my back when you guys get all sideways and rule following and realize that it's actually no fun and we got to keep this on a fun track.
That's right.
So we're all set.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Check out that mustache. It's looking cool. Hey, so anyway, this podcast is sponsored by Super Tech University, supertechu.com. And if you have technicians and they need some skills when they deal with people, we can help you out because we are experts and we have a tech whisperer on staff that is quite stickling that he can help your technicians be unstickling on site so they can communicate well with yourself, the client, and your fellow team. And it goes wonderful. So anyway, go to supertechu.com and check us out. You'll see some sample lessons, sign up, and get your company going in the right direction. Bam!
We recommend it to everybody.
Podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
Bam. That's right.
We have amazing guests today.
They're not guests, Larry. They're partners in this venture.
We're going to let you introduce them. Good Lord. He's getting stickling with me here.
So it begins.
We have Chris and Brandon of the Floodlight Consulting Group. We're very excited to have them today. And we're going to be talking about 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. Very excited.
That's a great book. So real quick, Brandon and Chris, our Floodlight friends, have joined us to start up the book club. For those who have been listening for a long time, we used to do it with Bill Yaden every month. We did a book a month. And I couldn't think of two. Bill retired and said, I'm never reading a business book as long as I live again. I'm going to hike and bike and spend time with my grandkids and drink Guinness and go off into the sunset. So
smart man.
That's what Bill's doing. And
that's my plan too someday.
And I just couldn't think of two better partners to bring on and do this than you guys. So we're really excited about this. Thanks for coming on.
Us too, man.
Right on,
you.
man.
Yeah.
We're excited. Yeah,
that's good. So we picked an interesting book. I mean, I think the hardest thing for us today is going to be distilling this down from an enterprise level to a home service level. But I think there were a lot of interesting points to be made. So I don't know, Brandon, do you want to maybe try to give us the highlights of the book? Just like somebody could say, well, I haven't read 0 to 1. So kind of what's it about? Maybe just a very broad stroke, and then we can kind of start digging in.
Yeah, it is challenging. It's written by a man that's playing at a level in business that most of us are, have not been exposed to. These are billion-dollar, trillion-dollar valued companies. But this 0 to 1, it's this idea of we actually kind of all buy into a myth surrounding capitalism and this idea that competition is is good, right, for consumer and business operations or business operator. And what he's kind of contesting, I guess, or saying is it's actually a monopoly, right? And not the kind where they have like lording over, or there's no opportunity to exist in the market, but it's this idea of creating a company that is so different that you're not really competing against anybody. And when you do so, that's where the real profits begin to be gained, I guess. And so he contests the idea that in an environment where high competition is at play, we will not be able to create profit, real profit, sustainable profit. So,
Yeah.
and there's a ton of, sub content essentially to that, but I don't know. That's kind of the umbrella.
Yeah.
What did you guys take?
I also took the concept of you can't, without that amount of profit or monopolizing, let's say in a service business, maybe not the whole industry, but just a certain portion of it in your town. Like as I was reading it, I'm not thinking globally like he's thinking. I'm thinking, if I have a service business in this town, how can I monopolize something that's related to my business against all my competitors, that like I'm the best at this one thing and I'm going to dominate this, to create enough money to be able to give the service that I want to be able to give, to be able to pay the team what they really deserve, to be able to grow that business. And we all know when you're competing hard, I mean, Larry and I, where we were in Southern California, our market was tough. And you know what? Yeah, it leaves a lot of people with a little.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people with a lot. And I mean, we felt that, and I'm sure you guys have felt that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're right. I think that idea of distilling it down to let's focus on a market and some of the ways that we differentiate ourselves for this concept of monopoly is smart. Because I think the book itself was so global in nature, it's difficult to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the concepts were really good. So you can be creative with what he was saying.
Yeah.
Niche down on what you can do to make yourself a monopoly. Do something that other people aren't doing. And that's something we need to remind ourselves, that we have to stand out in our marketplace for our clients and to take jobs from the competitors.
Well,
right.
I thought of two things that Larry and I did over the years that might in some way, shape, or form fit into this formula, right? So, we're running around, Larry's running around with his pineapples, meeting property managers and agents and plumbers and, all the things that everybody else does too, right? And, you see all the magnets on the file cabinet, and how do you stand out? And in Southern California, at least, a lot of companies didn't want to do any crawl space work, right? They just wouldn't do it. Like, confined space, Southern California, crawl space might be 2 feet, full of sewage. So we decided, hey, let's become the crawl space guys, right? And the thing is that
sound attractive, Brandon, does it? His face.
Well, no, but hold on. Here's the thing, and here's the monopolistic portion, right? So a lot of companies are unwilling to do that. So we're hiring people that are willing to do that work, knowing full well that you need to be like 140 pounds and be able to fit through the hole and stay down there all day without freaking out. But the thing is that if I am willing to go do all those crawl space jobs, then now I'm in with that plumbing company, and they start calling us instead of the XYZ company for the stuff that's above ground jobs, right?
Yeah.
So like I thought of that came to my head. That was one of our things. And then on the cleaning side, guys are slugging it out, like single truck operators to get residential work, and just, driving the price down, and you can only serve so much. How much service can you really do? So, we kind of looked at our business and said, hey, we have a lot of people. We could cross train them. We could do much bigger projects on the commercial side, have contracts, but then also go after the types of businesses that tend to flood, like hotels, so that we can then get that. So like, I mean, were we monopolizing those things? Well, no, but maybe compared to our competitors, we had a couple niches that they weren't or couldn't fulfill.
Yeah. The other takeaway that I had, and it was more of like kind of a meta takeaway, I guess, as I was trying to read between the lines throughout this whole book and like, what is the application like we're talking about for our industry? And what is this application for me? Because all the stories he talks about, they're so iconic. They're so big, you know, it was like, what's in this for me? And I guess part of what I found really inspiring about 0 to 1 is noticing how Peter Thiel thinks about business. Like, to me, that was one of the major takeaways from the book, was just how much bigger people like Peter Thiel think about their businesses. Now, granted, they're in multi-billion-dollar technology space, so it's a different kind of platform than we're all playing in. But that thinking bigger. So when he starts talking about rivalries and sort of getting outside, like, rivalries don't create innovation, which I thought was an interesting thing he was saying, right? When we're benchmarking ourselves against the other leading players in our industry, we're not innovating, you know, like innovation doesn't flow out of that. Instead, we're doing one-upmanship. We're doing this thing a little bit better. We're doing that thing a little bit better. We're solving for customer pain that's resulting from the existing systems. But what I took away was Peter Thiel saying, hey, look, go create a new game. Create a completely different game that suits your customer, that no one else is offering that game, but it's the game that customers actually want to play, right? Go create that. Don't keep up with this whole keeping up with the Joneses kind of business game. And that forced me down all kinds of rabbit trails of, okay, what does it look like to actually invent a new game in this service vertical that we're in? And that's where things start to get really interesting. It's like, okay, what could we build or create that we know solves for the common customer pain in this industry, that comes at it from a totally different angle than we've previously been doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. We had a guy named Ron Holt on our podcast recently, and he had a maid service franchise and built it up and sold that franchise. And then started kind of looking around in the podcast. He was like, I looked around, and he's like, I kept looking at the moving industry. Like, it hasn't changed in 100 years, and it tends to suck. And, you know, everybody complains about it. And so he started a franchise called Pink Zebra. And he was telling us some of the things that they were trying. And he's like, look, not all of them work, right? Like, I'm figuring this out on the fly. But like, one of the things they do, right? So he's like, can we really figure out how to load a truck better? Probably not. Is the truck any different? No. You know, are the people that are coming to apply to my job much different than the, other guy? Not really. Right. So he's like, it comes down to service, right? How can I create a service experience that will stand out? And, I mean, they do things like, they call the people that they're going to move the night before and say, we're going to be over within the hour with dinner for everybody. How many people are in the family? Or like they're just doing different things. And it's those kinds of things. And he's like, we've tried I can't remember what the other ones were. He had tried some other like crazy stuff, right? Where it didn't work, but he was trying to figure out, how can I be completely rewriting this game? And he's, as a disruptor, it's interesting because he's a very mild-mannered guy, but he's creating a lot of waves in that moving space, because they're just like, we hate this guy. Like, who brings dinner? And I'm just using that as an extreme example, but he was doing lots of things, small things, to create a service experience that was completely different from his competitors. And I bet you, if we have Ron back on in 5 years, he will have rewritten that game quite a bit.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I honed in on when reading this, was just these, what are the small things that we can do to create differentiation between us and somebody else in the industry as a whole. And like, one example that kind of came to mind that I think a lot of us have been exposed to is Watley's
Emergency Pack
Out Co. And he talks about earn the hug, right? Like, that's kind of their internal charge. And I think what's interesting about that, it may not seem like a major differentiation, but if we just think about how our industry in generally in general operates, how many of us are using language that's touchy-feely, heartsy-mindsy around the way that a disaster response team comes in and takes care of a client in need? And we've talked about this quite a bit, that is language that's just, it's kind of hard for most of us to use on a consistent basis, intentionally or seriously. And they're like, no, we're going to use it. In fact, it's going to be the credo, and we're going to actually create behaviors and actions that earn that. And when we do, we're going to create an experience that's different. And it is working. We have clients that use them, and they're like, I don't care if somebody else will give me a 20%, marketing fee. Like, I'm not going to take a chance of using somebody else because their team earns the hug. Right. So I think that's an example, right, of how we can do that. If
have you heard about,
what was the Watley emergency? What was it? Is this?
Yeah, EPC, Emergency Packout Company, based in San Diego. It's one of Watley's companies he founded with a couple other guys, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just there's a very interesting culture they developed, and Watley's kind of a blue ocean strategy guy to begin with. I mean, he's a pretty inventive, innovative dude, but one of our clients started using EPC for their for all their contents pack out. And so I didn't know exactly how it works, but I guess it's turning into a bit of an infomercial for EPC. Yeah. But basically what we found out is rather than split a marketing fee or some percentage of the invoice.
I don't know if you can share that. That might be you can't say
that might be proprietary.
That might be,
but it was definitely one of these blue ocean strategies.
Hold on, I'm gonna write the time down and cut that out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, he didn't actually.
But you can tell us. It's okay. We won't tell anybody.
Yeah, we'll just tell you. Just don't record it. No, I don't know. We'd have to get permission from him.
We're back on.
Yeah.
Oh, where were we? Goodness.
He does that to me all the time. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an idea on this, you guys, and I'm trying not to. I'm not derailing us, but okay, chapter 9.
No,
okay?
It's okay to derail. It's
okay. We'll derail and come back. Yeah, we're playing in and out of the lines at the same time here. So so chapter 9, he talks about, so it's called Foundations, right? And one of the things that he talks about is compensation. And he starts diving into this idea of compensation that prepares people for the long term, like engages them for the long haul. And I thought this was an interesting place for us to think about in terms of creating differentiation in our team, in our industry, especially because it seems like tech companies and some of these other industries, this whole profit sharing employee ownership model is more widely accepted, or is already there's precedents that have already been set for it. And I'm not seeing a lot of companies on scale do something like this. And what kind of blew me away is I just started thinking about what are some of the ways that a company could think outside of the box and create a level of engagement by their employees, where their employees, it's like Costco, like, the employees that are really engaged because in some way they feel this sense of ownership, like legitimate ownership in the process. And I wonder how many of us have tried this or explored this, gotten our, bruises, but tried to intentionally figure this out or stay in the trench long enough to come up with a model. Because if part of our major issue that we're all struggling with is hiring people, imagine when word gets out that you're a disaster restoration company that's employee owned, as an example. Like, you'd have people beating your door down from our industry. We all talk about would be great to hire a tech with experience. It'd be great to hire a project manager that's not only been doing construction, but been in our industry. Well, if you're the only show in town that offers some kind of legitimate ownership or participation at a long-term view, seems like you'd have it would change the talent war a little
Brandon, do you think something like the Great Game of Business and implementing that to its fullest extent? Because, the owner can still own it, but it's open book management. Everybody's getting a piece of that action based on their actions. And Larry and I, the company that bought us, they use Great Game of Business to great effect. They actually have a meeting every Wednesday. Every single person in the company, for the most part, has a line item that on a Zoom call they have to be responsible for. And why is office supplies up 15% from last year? And the level of engagement is very, very strong in using a tool like that.
There was a company, I'm not going to use their name, but it's a local company in our market, not in our industry, and they were essentially employee owned, and they did the same thing. They were very transparent in their P&L review. Like, there was no red line that wasn't talked about. They literally reviewed the financials in depth, and there was a profit sharing model in place. And so they would talk about the level of commitment from their employees on the production floor. Like, those guys were doing more to clean up inefficiencies because they knew that that profit was something that they were going to participate in. And so the level of ownership that they showed was really insane. And the interesting thing is I remember when we were being presented with this model, we were seeing it in action in an environment where the worker base is similar to ours. It's more blue collar in nature, and how successful it was being. Yet I still had this pause or hesitation to be that transparent in the way that we talked about our financials. So it is interesting.
But the proof,
it will work.
I know which company you're talking about. We actually toured their facility with them, with one of their executives. Yeah. Retention was nutso as well.
Bonkers.
Oh, I mean, just absolutely bonkers. I think the average retention was like 15 years.
It was nuts.
Yeah. So
in an environment that probably has like 60-70% turnover normally.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's great. That's huge numbers.
Well,
huge.
and it goes, I think money is obviously at the forefront for most people who seek employment, right? But
Yeah.
As we all know, we've had these conversations, and this is kind of what I was taking out of the book. You know, actually, the next chapter, branded chapter 10, which is something like
the mechanics of
like
mafia.
Mechanics of mafia, right? But that's
Yeah.
culture. That's a culture thing, right? I mean, that's really what they're talking about. And you know, and if you look at those early tech companies where like those people are like working 100-hour weeks, just bleeding Facebook blue or whatever, right? And now, granted, for them, there's a financial incentive to that if they're getting stock options and they want it to go public and all that. But the same can be true in a localized market for a service business, because if you start with the end in mind, right? Like, that's the one thing I've learned by having the podcast. Like, if I decided tomorrow that I'm going to start a service business, everything would be different than the one that Larry and I started 15 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of companies, if you're small, start now in building that company that people want to stay at and work and run through a wall for. And, we had it kind of both ways. Early years, we were the worst to work for. I mean, Larry and I were just all production and go and make money, and
Eric was way worse than me.
I need
clearly.
I don't know about that. And we were just all about production. And we really didn't take any consideration whatsoever into who does the production. It's just like, I got jobs, I need them done. I pay you, you do them, you go home. I don't think about you again. Like, we really, early years, thought that way. And obviously we changed, and at the end, when we started investing in that culture, in the mafia, like for us, it was the Shamrock Mafia in these terms, right?
Yeah.
I had the guys, but with our morning meetings, I would always say, like, guys, we're the best. There's nobody in our area that's better at what we do than we are. And then they would say, how do we know that's true?
Yeah.
And then I'd say, okay, well, let's think about this. We all run the same equipment. We all run the same vans. We all buy the uniforms at the same place. We all have an iPhone. We all have, whatever, right? Everything's the same. So the only thing that changes is how we feel about our company culture, and the training that we all give each other every day. And I'm like, who are we competing with, where the whole team is sitting down every Wednesday and doing disc training so that you can not only be good at work, but be good at home?
Yeah.
How many people are having in-depth conversations with 30 technicians about job site behavior every single week? Like, I'm like, guys, nobody's doing this. I'm positive of that. And then all of a sudden, what does that do? That creates the sense in them that yeah, we are the best. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I would get calls from the field like, oh, hey, boss, I'm at, you know, XYZ neighborhood and such a restoration company's there. They're such hacks. They're not doing any of the things we're doing. Right. But, you know, so my point is, along with the book, I mean, to a certain degree, we did it. We did that. Like, we realized that, oh my gosh, this is actually possible.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you have 2 guys or 200, it's doable.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's, you know, one of the things that pops into my mind when you say that is this: how many folks, right, who are just trying to protect every dollar from their overhead spend. Now, we're not talking about swinging the pendulum to irresponsibility. So, I mean, probably don't need to say that, but we're so focused in grinding down our costs, yet we
Oh, you
still,
talking about Larry?
well, yeah, of course it's Larry, right? You
Hey
heartless
now,
animal, you
slow down.
heartless. But we're doing that, and we look at our EBITDA at the end of the day, and it's still not what we want. Yet we're afraid to proactively spend to get what we want, which is what you're talking about. It's like, I'm deathly afraid of having the cost of payroll to have my team sit in a room and take training that will ultimately equip them to go out and stop this cycle of me beating my head against the wall of lost profits because my team doesn't execute well in the field. To now it's like, well, I'm just going to preemptively and proactively spend a specific fixed amount, knowing that it's likely going to give me the kind of result that I want on scale later. So it's like 100% of zero is zero, right? If we can dedicate that spend intentionally, say yes to it in a proactive way, it's probably going to return to us tenfold on scale, right? As the team's operating at that capacity across the board, right? Creating the gross profit margin that we want out in the field on a consistent basis, which it all sounds easy on paper, but
Well, and that's all predicated on sort of this growth mindset, right? It's being able to kind of see up above the day-to-day impact of how many payroll dollars I'm spending. I'm tallying the people in the room. It's a today mindset versus what am I building? You know, it's like, it's getting into that builder mindset. And I feel like that's what's just oozed out of 0 to 1 is this,
100%.
it's a builder mindset. And I think so many of us are in an operator mindset, you know?
Well, and through the entire book, Peter Thiel is somebody who's taking the long game into account. That's what I like. Every single page just dripped of, this is all about the long game.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who's a tech guy, and, you know, he's been very successful. We've talked about him in the past. And whenever I'm having conversations with him, his conversations with me about change are in years and decades.
Yeah.
I mean, he always says that you will not be successful in any business until at least year 10. I don't care what you do. He's like, it's 10 years. He tells me that like weekly. Anytime I bitch and moan, he goes, 10-year rule. 10 years, all of a sudden you're killing everybody. And it's like, for us, it's like, I can't even handle 10 weeks.
Oh man, that's heavy.
Yeah, but that's a mindset. It's a different mindset, like Peter Thiel in his book. I mean, you just long game is winning.
Yeah. It's overwhelming, I think, to some folks though, to think out that long. And I think too, we put ourselves in financial positions, and I'm guilty of this. I've done it more times than I'd like to admit, where we put ourselves in a position where we can't actually play to the long game, right? The way that we lead our business, the way that we spend our money after we balance that P&L and see what's left. Like, is there a way for us? And again, I know this sounds so easy yakking into a microphone, but the idea that someone could take their profits, and when they talk about reinvesting in their business, if they're reinvesting in their people, their most important resource, long enough, that what happens when on scale you begin to get that momentum back, right? You talk about the 5, 6, 7, 10 years. I'm just thinking with some of this employee profit sharing model, like, it might be painful at the beginning, but man, over the long term, when a business goes from, trying to push out $1.5 million and grinding every gear they got to they're screaming 10, 15 million a year. Well, then all of a sudden it's like, there's so much to go around, and you really reap the benefit of a team that they're carrying that business on their shoulders because they love it. It's theirs. Yeah. I don't know. who knows?
No, it is hard, Chris, and I mean Brandon, and I think one of the things that owner would probably have to do is say, well, what are the things that I could do that are not financially very expensive for me to do? Like, it's a marginal gains thing, right? Like, what are the little things I can do now at the amount of money that I have to increase engagement, to keep people longer, to have happy customers, to find a niche in my market that maybe will get me some extra dollars because it isn't as competitive.
Yeah.
And then just start organically growing it from there. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we're going to have an hour meeting with all people every day. You know,
Yeah.
Larry and I mean, we've never espoused that. You know, it's like meet for a few minutes, and over time that will start to yield benefits.
Yeah.
And I also think that a lot of this for owners, and I'd love your feedback, is it's an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. I mean, they don't talk about that in the book very much, but you know, you have to think in abundance to make these kinds of decisions that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Anybody got any?
Well, he talks
feedback
about boldness. Like he does talk about boldness a little bit. Like one of the things he mentions in one chapter says, it's better, I have it right up here, it's better to risk boldness than triviality, right? It's better to err on the side of making bold moves than to just simply default to the best practice, right? Because the best practice in our industry would have been, you know, morning stand to, get them out the door, hand them their work orders, just be done. Right. That's what we've always done in the industry, is just, hey, you send people out with their work orders, they get in their trucks, they take off, they go do the work, they bill for it. That's our whole system. And right, the idea of teaching soft skills, the idea of providing your people professional development, equipping and resources, that's bold. I mean, the idea that you would invest in somebody as a person, right, when you're not investing in their production, right, is a bold thought, right, in our industry, right?
And like what Brandon was talking about earlier, showing them P&L, taking time out of the day to explain where the money's coming and going. That's another bold approach.
Yeah, it is.
The best practice is generally, no, they don't need to know this stuff. Just pay them.
They're not smart enough to understand.
Well, I think we're going to see a generation gap that's going to start to widen. And we've had this, the four of us have had this conversation offline before, where you go to certain events and you see an owner of a certain age who's reached a certain level of success, quote unquote, and they have it in their mind that this is the only way to do this, right? But as the world changes around them, and as the marketplace changes around them, you don't see them adapting. And I'm already starting to see it, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that owner who's my age, 55, 50, 55, 60, I mean, Larry and I have gone through great lengths and a lot of work to not think our age in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're going to start to see younger owners who are more in tune with their team, more in tune with their culture, more in tune with figuring out using technology to engage their staff in a more meaningful way. They are going to start kicking guys like my age's asses.
That's right.
Yep.
I really believe that. And I think that in a lot of ways, that can be the monopoly in your market.
Yeah.
If I'm a 30-year-old restoration company owner who thinks completely different than all the Larrys and the Erics and the Brandons and the Chris's, right? All of a sudden, is that my monopoly opportunity?
Totally agree. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of you got to be careful with details. Like if it's too close, inevitably that person calls you and says, I know you were talking about me.
We get that sometimes.
So here, my thought along those lines, Eric, is it's so native to them. Like somebody that's, sub 40 years old, the needs of their employees are native to them. It's the same need that 40-year-old wants and has. And it's interesting because as much as we at times can complain about the younger generations for whatever, broad strokes comments that we want to argue or whine about, there is something really powerful about this generation that excites me. And that is the fact that they are willing to say they don't know. Like this generation is so good at understanding that to win is to just figure out where to find information. It's not that you have the information, that they're better learners in a lot of ways. Like when we talk to younger business owners, they're much better at telling us the real problems and not the presenting problems. Chuck uses that term, which I just totally like. And it's this idea that our older dogs, they know everything, right? They just are struggling to translate that information to a younger generation. Well, okay, there's probably some element of fact in there, but also it's because you know everything, you don't understand, you're still learning. And that's part of the reason that you're struggling. Like the younger group, you get somebody that's 35, 40 years old, and they're not afraid to say, I don't know, because they'll look that shit up. They're not afraid of that. And so the coaching relationship gains momentum so much faster because they're willing to learn and go in and figure it out. It's like they want a partner. They want to talk to you openly about what's happening and not happening and where their frustrations are. My favorite is our young leaders, guys, like where they'll call us, like, I'm not lying. I've had times where there's an emotional outward expression of the frustration that they're dealing with as young leaders trying to learn how to lead people. You know how much more I have to work with when I know that that's happening versus all the presenting BS.
Yeah.
Right. Like they get momentum and change in their business because they're dealing with truth instead of posturing. Right. I don't know. We're kind of going out on a tangent here.
Well,
but
go ahead, Chris. You're going to say so. I have something after.
I had a whole different topic I was going to explode on. So
can I just go down what Brandon said real quick?
Yeah.
So Brandon, I lived that a little bit. So I worked at a golf simulator manufacturer for a very interesting entrepreneur in my career before home services. And he was, when I started working there, he was probably early 60s. Everybody he hired was 25 to 30 years old. Our entire building was full of 28-year-olds, right? And he did that, I believe, knowingly. He wanted the energy and the drive and the new outlook of us. And then he mentored us and kind of fathered us to, say, this is how business runs. Like I've been doing this a long time. How can we improve on this? Right. And we sold more, small industry. We dominated that industry. And I think it was just what you said. He had the wherewithal to understand, hey, I'm in my 60s and I need some young people with a lot more energy and new ideas. And then I need to temper those ideas with some realities that I've learned along the way. And we were doing more business than all of our competitors combined yearly. I mean, we truly had a monopoly in that business. Now, he has since passed, and that business is competitive as like all that shit went out the window when he died, to be honest. But having witnessed that, I think it didn't even dawn on me until you were saying it. I was just like, this is what he did. I remember we were playing golf one day with some guys, and he pointed up to his beautiful mansion up on the hill. And he and I used to play every like Thursday afternoon. And then the guys are like, oh, are you an engineer? No. Are you a master salesman? No. So what are you? And he said, I hire people that are smarter than me, and then I keep all the money. It was joking because that was one of his things. He paid us more money than we could have ever made anywhere else.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Shared.
That's the magic, right? That's the magic. There's so much wisdom in that. It's
he
unbelievable.
Was such a good entrepreneur. It was crazy.
Wow.
Well, and it kind of goes back to the that mechanics of mafia, right? Where the author's talking about the PayPal mafia and how all of them went out and later and ended up being founders of all the big tech companies that we see every day. But what he was talking about was this idea that there was a vision that everyone was so bought into that they were all pushing at the same pace to bring that thing to fruition. And I think that we forget in service companies that just because our employee workforce is predominantly blue collar, that they don't have the same primal instincts that every other human being has, whether you work in tech or not, that they want to be a part of something that has a point to it. Like if you create an environment where we just show up to grind gears, you're going to get employees that show up just to grind gears, and nobody's passionate about that. They're not. But if they're coming to an environment where there's a clear vision and there's a story and there's a mission behind what we're doing and we're clear on why we're doing it, and they're seeing people be equipped through mentorship and coaching and really good leadership principles, now all of a sudden, like that's a differentiator. That would create monopolies in our kind of industry, because right now, at least, and it may not be the case for a whole lot longer, as you alluded to, right now, that still makes you very different than 90% of the companies doing what we do. Right.
Yeah. Well,
Uh-oh, Larry just, I think Larry crushed under the weight. He's
The cops showed up, said, move the
here.
van down by the river.
Yeah, there was somebody coming really close and looking, and they had cross-eyed, so it made me a little nervous. We're all good.
uh-oh.
All right. Well, can we dig in a little bit, and let's talk about, I mean, because you guys know on this show, it's not just restoration, right? And I think there's a lot of carryovers. So whether we're a carpet cleaning business or a plumber or HVAC guy or a restoration company, having read the book, if somebody came to Brandon, Chris, and Larry and said, okay, I read the book too, but I really don't know what to do next. I don't know what to implement. How do I take this, like you guys said earlier, this really global idea from a very big thinker, and how do I capitalize on it as a local service provider? What would the answer be?
Oh, dude, I would tell him maybe to pick up a different book, but
I know, but we're dealing with this book.
well,
This is the premise of this show.
it is, yeah. Well, I think this book is more about the way of thinking, right? This is one of those books that's more about perspective and mindset, in my opinion. That's how I would suggest people use it, right?
I agree.
It's principles versus tactics. Like, and one of the sections he talks about sales. You guys remember this part?
Mm-hmm.
And he breaks down some myths, right? That, in fact, I have it up here. He talks about some of the common myths that I think we've established in business is this idea of making incremental advances. Don't be too bold. Don't get too crazy and out in front of yourself. Is something that I think we've all heard as a best practice. Stay lean and flexible. Don't go all in on anything. Improve on the competition, right? Incremental improvements is how you do business. Focus on the product. This was a big thing in tech was, hey, don't worry about sales. Just make the product really awesome and it'll sell itself. And
yeah, engineers say shit like that.
Engineers say shit like that, but you know what? Service company owners say shit like that too.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? Yeah, pest control guys, home service guys, like contractors. Oh, it's all about the service. We get that right, it'll sell itself.
Carpet cleaners. Nobody has a better pre-spray than me.
Oh my goodness, right? Yeah. But then he goes into how these are all really myths, right? And he talks about, and of course, if you look at any tech company now, every startup has a sales leader and or a sales team from the jump. But that wasn't the case in the 2000s, the big .com bubble. It was just, hey, if we build a cool product, they will come. And the investors came, but the clients didn't always come, right? And so things blew up. I think that's an interesting topic just to mull over is how are we looking at sales in our companies? Because I think a lot of service businesses fail to prioritize any kind of sales operation at all. I mean, I see these people all the time that they might have a route salesperson, but that's not actually selling. That's promotion. That's
marketing.
That's marketing, right? It's lead gen and effectively, but it's not selling. And I think we sometimes in the service industry can buy into that same mindset of people love us. Well, look how many Google reviews we have. We don't we get most of our business from word of mouth. I mean, how many times have a lot of us heard that? And I think the reality is in the service sector is that it's both and we really lose sight of that, right? I think we can we can over-index on our reputation, not prioritize sales, but we can also do the opposite, which is we hire a bunch of salespeople and we think just hiring salespeople is going to sell our company and help us grow. And of course, if we don't do enough tuning on our product, our customer experience, right, then we're creating egg on our sales reps' faces, right? They're out selling a vision. It's a revolving door. Yeah. Those sales reps are selling a vision that our production and our operations teams can't deliver on, right? And so it's really a both and. It's like, yeah, build it and they will come. It's more like build the right product and people will come back. But we've still got to have somebody out telling the story, connecting the dots, right? Finding the pain and selling to it. I thought that was an interesting kind of juxtaposition he makes of how we used to just think, just make a cool product, build it and they will come. And we found out that actually that doesn't work. But we still do that in the service sector, you know?
TPAs.
Yeah, then there's TPAs. Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I probably shouldn't go there.
No.
Podcast.
Yeah,
No,
I think, Chris, what you said though earlier, prior to this portion about sales, was if somebody came and asked me, okay, what do I do with this book? The conversation would be the same as what you said. I'd say, okay, this is about mindset. Like, let's talk about you, because look, you guys are doing it too. We're coaches. We're coaching all day, and it's so funny. Yeah. I have a company that, has had a lot of success over the course of a 2.5-year period. 2 years was spent working on the owners, and then once we got that down, like we could then start to talk strategy. And it's not like we didn't make any progress through the 2 years, but for all of us, every single one of us, we have to be able to take outside input and then figure out how we could change ourselves to make us collectively a better company.
Yeah, I think a book like this, it helps get me out of desperation brain. We talk to our clients about this all the time. It's like you get so mired in the minutia of your business and the business that's in front of you right now. We get overwhelmed by all the things that we're not yet. We get overwhelmed by cash flow situation. We get overwhelmed by all the things, all the tactical things, and we get desperation brain where we're plugging holes. We're constantly plugging holes. And you read books like this and you're like, okay, there is a much, much, much bigger picture here than I'm taking into account right now, right? If I can zoom out and get in this more, we always talk about the 30,000 foot view, right? But if I can get myself to take that, all of a sudden some of that desperation goes away because I realize, okay, there's a much bigger thing we're working on here. Yeah, there's a little molehill in front of me, but I'm going to the mountain, So there's that effect that these kind of books have. It's just helping us escape that desperation brain. We're so mired in our business, we forget about the big picture. And I think too, we can sometimes we lose track of what the bigger opportunity is. We're troubleshooting this thing today, but what's the big opportunity? And one of the questions I had, and I don't know, maybe we'll have to say this for a part 2, but this also made me really sentimental reading this book because it made me think through all of my past businesses that I've either ran or owned. And it made me think about my original vision for those businesses and the things I never got to. And I was curious, and maybe we could end on this, or one of you has a story that comes to mind. But one of the questions I had was, with your previous business, was there a dream or a vision? Was there a bigger mountain out in front of you that you never ended up climbing before you sold, that you still think back and be like, okay, I had this Mount Everest vision, and for whatever reason, we decided to not do that, or we had this opportunity to sell before that happened. But was there a big, hairy blue ocean kind of target that you guys had in your minds at one point?
There was for me. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember before Larry came aboard, before I even started day one, I have a house that looks down over this valley, and I'd sit up late at night Chris, and be dreaming up that business in my head. I mean, it was so vivid. I could see every truck, I could see every van, I could see the workbench, I could see, and you start doing a business, it doesn't look anything like any of that, right? And I remember I got so frustrated at one point, and of course I'm blaming them and not myself and Larry, right? So I actually typed the whole thing up. I typed it up and I handed it out to everybody. And I was basically like, look, you motherfuckers, like, this is what my dream is. Like, you guys are messing it up, right? Like, I wasn't taking any responsibility for myself. But you know what? That was kind of right around the turning point where I was like, I need to teach them how to help me get my dream. And then I need to find out what their dream is so that they can have the same things. And, did Larry and I reach, exactly what my sheet looked like? No, but it was a lot closer than when I had that meltdown and wrote the whole thing out for everybody and, accused them of stealing my dream,
That's such a funny story, dude. But what that reminds me of, we did a while back, we did a workshop with Rachel Stewart, formerly of Titan, now at Accelerate. And she has this whole thing. Her father's a coach and consultant, public speaker and stuff. And we did this thing on visioneering. It's exactly what you talked about, essentially, just downloading all of it, the sensory, what's this going to feel like, look like to have this successful business? What are my team members going to look like? And it was an amazing process, but the clarity that comes, right, with putting that vision down on paper. Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's my takeaway, man. Like, if I was going to boil down this entire book, 0 to 1, is we can't treat our businesses like they're just a boring utilitarian experience. Like, if you do that, you've just closed off the most momentum building power source that a business has. And that's people who are excited to get behind a mission and march towards a common goal.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it is that service companies, and again, we make broad strokes, but service companies, for whatever reason, have just stayed in this zone of provide a good utilitarian product, this thing. We installed the HVAC unit on time, on the right date, and that's as good as it gets, because that's boring and nobody wants to participate in that. Nobody wants to show up for that. What people want to do is work for people that are excited about helping people and producing something that's worth talking about.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, like, I think the goal is you really have to ask yourself what kind of business that you're building, because if it's boring and utilitarian in nature, you're only going to get people that want to be part of that kind of system. I need your power. And it's, you're not going to get anything valuable. Like let's, and if that's where you're at, man, you probably need to really think about why you're in business, because that's got to suck for you too, if we're honest about it. You know what I mean?
Oh, if it's that boring for the team, you're bored too.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's got to be.
Yeah.
You're at minimum,
The
you're
team's gonna
freaking
be
disgruntled. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not bored,
they're gonna.
Look, Larry and I had periods where we just look at each other and be like, oh my gosh, we got to go back in there tomorrow.
right.
Like, if I have to go do one more carpet bid, I'm going to explode.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I loved carpet cleaning and I loved doing carpet bids, but like you said, it was like becoming a utilitarian experience.
Yeah.
And nobody's moved by that.
No.
You can do utilitarian things in a culture that means much more.
That's
Don't
right.
don't you think?
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah. There's tasking. I mean, we're not, it's not rainbows and unicorns. There's tasking that we need to accomplish. But I mean, think about the military. Okay. Let's think about special operations units as an example. Their work environments often are literally the shittiest thing that anyone in the world is going to experience ever. It's this tiny percentage of people that deal with the level of suck that these guys have to deal with. Yet they are dedicated to that mission to the point they will literally put their life on the line. They're so in it for their fellow brother.
So
right?
Brandon, I know we're running out of time, but I know you've lived this. How do they create that?
it's literally a dependency on one another. Like everything that you eat, sleep, and breathe is, I do this for you, you do this for me. It's all for one and one for all.
Yeah,
Like that's
awesome.
really what it boils down to, right? Like you're dedicated to something that at the end of the day, when everybody holds up their end of the load, the mission gets accomplished. And that interdependency is something really special. But you have to get good at conflict management. You got to manage attitudes, and you got to get connected with your people. You can't treat them like they're no-named cogs. Like that's not how it works, right?
Well, interestingly, I mean, I've done a fair amount of research on soft skills training because that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's attributed to the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
As
Mhm.
developing
Excellent.
it, because they realize that, if we're going to go to war, people need to be able to lead other people to war.
Right.
You
That's
know,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fundamental. So, all right, I know we have like 2 minutes. So I want to wrap this up. You guys have to pick a book for next month.
Ooh.
Hey, all right.
Okay.
So
I got one in mind. We'll save.
we'll
the
leave it
surprise
to
though.
you. So what we'll do is we're gonna we'll put this at the end. We'll announce what the next book will be for next month, so everybody has a month to read it, so they can get going. All
Right
right.
on.
All right,
Chris,
Larry,
what's your idea?
take us
Go
out.
ahead. No, I want to hear Chris's idea first. What was your book idea?
Oh no, dude, I'm saving the surprise. I got 2. I'm gonna have to arm wrestle Brandon because
All
I
right.
got 2 in mind.
All right.
Yeah. Right on. Well, anyway, Chris Nordike going deep at the end. And we appreciate it totally. Killer podcast. Thank you, gentlemen. Book club, successful first podcast.
Love it.
We'll see you guys later. We're out.
It's fun.
See you.